Hello, friends, and welcome to the InterWorld Podcast, where we explore the intersection of personal and collective transformation. My name is Yasha S. Wagner, and I'm a PhD researcher in the field of psychology, well-being, and spirituality, as well as a founder of the InterWorld Institute for Inner World Peace. You can learn more about our nonprofit initiatives by going to interworld.org. Today, I have the great pleasure and special treat of speaking with a dear old friend of mine, Jerry Walsh. Jerry is many things: a Dharma practitioner, a fellow student on the path. He is also a sound healer and a retreat facilitator. He's into all kinds of amazing practices and topics that we'll be exploring and studying together. And I know that Jerry's also had a fascinating life journey, so I'm excited to learn more about him. I've known him for probably a decade, but I know that I'll discover new kernels and insights today, and just love Jerry and his whole family. And without further ado, here's my interview with Jerry Walsh. Hey, brother.
Good to see you, Yasha. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on the podcast. Welcome.
Oh, for sure. I've had you on my podcast, so at least I could do.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't even mention you've got the Bodhi Speak podcast. You've been doing that for how long now?
Since the pandemic, I think it started in 2021.
Yeah, I remember jumping on there. Thank you for doing that. So I know that I always tend to invite the guests to just like introduce more about their journey, like particular highlights and key moments in your own path that brought you to this moment. Just because the bio doesn't necessarily do it justice. So like anything that stands out from the epic adventure of life, and then anything also just about like your mission and what you're here to do on the planet. Big questions.
Yeah, sure. But that's good. I mean, maybe one quick thing, if someone was to come across my bio, I've been blessed with the opportunity to travel a lot. That's maybe the first thing that comes to mind. And I don't think a lot of people actually know why. I haven't really talked much about it, but my grandmother used to work for United Airlines. And when I graduated college, she gave me essentially what are called like buddy passes, and I was able to hop on United Airline flights for free. I had virtually no money when I was doing this. And oftentimes I would be given free plane tickets. I would have to find out like in the moment. It was this very serendipitous type experience where I would just hope I would get on a flight. I could check it ahead of time, but then you get to the airport and sometimes all of a sudden I had to be like in the flow in the moment. One time I was trying to get to Peru. I got blocked from going there, and so I just decided to hop on a plane to Argentina. My bag got sent to Peru. I picked it up a week later in Buenos Aires, but in long story short, I've had the opportunity to travel, and it's deeply shaped my worldview immensely. I've been to something like, I don't know, I think about 36 countries, and a lot of them I've been to 2 or 3 times. And as I said, I didn't really have any money when I was doing this. A lot of times the actual ticket, if had I paid for it, would have been more money than I had in my bank account, which is always kind of a funny experience. And that was just something that really gave me immense access to a diverse experience of different cultures and like firsthand encounters with a lot of different people and different spiritual traditions, different art, music, culture, all different types of things. And so that might be just one thing that a lot of people might not know about. Like, how did I get the opportunity to travel so much? It was, through the blessing of my grandmother and her being a United Airlines employee for a quarter of a century. And the first trip that I ever went on was I studied abroad, and I went to South Asia for a year. I spent on that trip 6 months in India, and I spent 3.5 months in Nepal, and I spent half a month or so in the kingdom of Bhutan. And I was really inspired to go deeper into the study of Buddhism. I came in contact with Buddhism around the age of 18 through a number of different experiences, and primarily through a lot of adversity and internal struggles emotionally and mentally, and not finding really any kind of reprise in modern culture, at least in the environment that I was in within a university. And I found real solace actually just by going to the library and like reading Dharma books. And I wasn't a musician at this point. I wasn't um, doing much in like a creative sense. And the first thing that really kind of began to open my mind was stepping into the world of Dharma, and then wanted to go much deeper into it and trying to understand where my head and couldn't stand being at school and the environment that it was. And so I found out that I could go abroad to South Asia for a year. And when I was there, I did a Buddhist pilgrimage. I went to the Buddhist holy sites in India, the birthplace, the place of the first sermon, and then the Enlightenment and the death of the Buddha. So Kushinagar, Sarnath. Oh my goodness, what are we talking about? I'm forgetting the name of it. Lumbini as well in Nepal. Um, and just had the opportunity to go to these Buddhist holy sites. And yeah, Buddhism for me is kind of like at the very core of, I would say, how I operate in the world and how I perceive the world through that lens in a lot of ways. I wouldn't call myself a Buddhist because I don't like being boxed into something like that. But yeah, then many things have happened since then, and I feel like you gave me a very big question. So if you want to help me hone it in, I would love some actual. Where would you like me to take it? Because there's
Sure.
many
Yeah. Well,
directions.
I have a bunch of follow-up questions on several of the topics, but that you brought up. But before I ask them, why don't you kind of shift into the mission part of the question? So, I was actually going to tease you, like I asked you to say what's the biggest moments that brought you to now, and you were like, this one time they took my luggage to the wrong airport. I'm just kidding. I'm teasing you. I just feel like I want to be open that you and I are like close friends and,
Yeah, you know how I
joke around a
operate,
lot.
though.
So yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. But anyways, I actually want to like bring it to the mission part of the question. So, the travel is important. We're going to come back to everything you shared, but what about like, what has this process brought you to up to now, realizing about like what you're here to share or be in service to in this incarnation, let's say?
Great, I appreciate that segue there. So just coming back to traveling in India, I went to India looking for a teacher, like looking for this archetypal Indian sage who could point me in the direction of some sort of version of transcendence in the way that I had experienced through various modalities, including plants and all different types of simple practices that happen to open doorways in the mind and the heart. And I went to India looking for a teacher. And I would say, in retrospect, I found many teachers, but I did not find like the teacher, the wise man. I came back to the United States, and I had the opportunity to come in contact with our teacher, Maestro Manuel Rufino, as a Taino elder, and someone that opened my doors to and my life experiences to many different things. And one of them being the community that I'm a part of, which is also a school here in upstate New York, and the Golden Drum community and so on. And within the framework of this school is a strong emphasis on responsibility and a strong emphasis on service and karma yoga and being of service to other people. And it's interesting because I remember being really strongly impacted by this concept of being of service to other people, of helping other people, of really looking at certain aspects of life, of social injustice or poverty, war, all these different conflicts and things that are happening, economic disparity, just looking at the world like, why is this the way that it is? Like, I can't digest this. And so that felt to me like a very important part of the path that I was on, and the idea of like going up and sitting in a cave and just abandoning the world, which, to be fair, I don't think is actually a central tenet of Buddhism in a lot of ways. People often misappropriate that concept to these Eastern traditions, but really, if you study them deeply, you find they're deeply engaged with the world. Nonetheless, just saying that kind of romanticized idea of Eastern philosophical practice never resonated with me. And when I came back and I had the opportunity to be in a meditative, let's say a Dharma talk with our teacher, Maestro Manuel, I remember one of the first things I heard him say in response to like, someone asked, like, how does one go out taking these experiences that we've had? And what is the approach? And I remember he said with this not extreme, but an intense conviction of service to others, and like find a way to help build community, find a way to help promote the holistic cohesiveness of nature and bringing us back in touch with nature. And this was something that just immediately resonated with me, and it just complete synchronization of like, this is what I feel called to do. So when I just wanted to provide the context of how many things in my life opened up through my teacher, through the community that I'm a part of currently, including our own relationship between you and I, Yasha, which obviously you know that, but just to say it publicly, was that meeting of the minds at that moment. This was in very synchronistically the the first day of 2012. This was in the morning of 2012, the very first day, January 1st, that this kind of came in. So people were like, oh, nothing happened in 2012. But for me, it was actually quite poetically perfect in that respect. And granted, there was the whole thing of the solstice and, 2012, December 21st. But that message of find a way to reharmonize and recalibrate and rebalance humanity with nature through the process of discipline and service to other people, building community, and that right there is the mission. And then I feel like that there's so many different facets in which that gets distilled, whether it's through creative expression, whether it's through farming, through construction, through family life, through meditation, through yoga. All of those things sort of fall under the umbrella of like selfless service to humanity, under the guidance of these traditions that have been around for thousands of years. Which, what I like about saying under the guidance of traditions is that it's not about following a religion. I'm very not religious, as you know. I'm very like, let's just say,
sacrilegious? No, just kidding.
I don't know about sacrilegious.
I'm kidding.
I'm sure someone's thought that maybe in their encounters with me, but like ultimately, like, but at the same time, there is something that those traditions embrace that ruptures any kind of structure. Like when you look at the Buddha was incredibly contrarian to so many things that were happening at his time. You look at Christ, there were so many things he was contrarian to at his time. And there's many figures, that have been like this. So I think that's what these traditions are asking us to do, is to take their wisdom, but to not get boxed in with it. So that was a pretty long answer to, I think, what you're trying to get out there. But I felt succinct there in some respects.
Oh, it's perfect. Maybe provocative is a better word than sacrilegious. I've heard different teachers call themselves provocative, and different people call teachers provocative, like provoking. Whether you're provoking the religious or the mind or whatever it is with seeming forms and rituals, or by breaking them and letting them fall by the wayside. It's like challenging those things. Yeah, were you about to say something?
I'm listening and just nodding with what you're saying. I remember our friend Matt Canali, he said something to me like over a decade ago that's always resonated, where he was talking about his first experience with a teacher in the Amazon. And he was like, yeah, like any good teacher, he was controversial.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember our own teachers sort of speaking to the general point that if people aren't finding you controversial and detracting somewhere, then maybe you're not doing it yet. So, so anyways, I want to actually, there's so much you're bringing up already. This isn't one of those episodes that I'm excited to keep shorter, although it might just mean we're going to have you back another time, because I think we could dive deep into all of this. But just for the moment, I want to go back to India, to Asia, to Buddhism, and like start by diving in a little more there. And I'm hearing you kind of describe almost an angst that I can relate to in terms of my like teenage years. I think you and I have similarities in that like questioning of why are things the way they are, and some dissatisfaction with some of the insanity, let's say, of the conflict and all the other things in the world that seem out of harmony and out of alignment. And so I'm hearing you describe like a rejection of that, like a rejection of what was available to you in the mainstream world, and like a looking for something more, something else. And then I'm hearing that ultimately you found that it wasn't about escaping, but was like, it's almost like a hero's journey, like coming back to re-engage. And clearly Buddhism played a big role in that. So I just want to start because we can't cover all of Buddhism tonight, but I want to start by just like inviting you to share any particular highlights. I'm very interested in Bhutan. I almost went once. I've never been. And I've heard you share about India in this way where it sounds like it was a very transformative experience. And I've heard that from many people who've gone there. So anything highlights from that trip, and then maybe we'll start to get into just like what core aspects of Buddhism have attracted you or informed your perspective, so you can share them with others. Yeah.
Yeah. I think one of the first things about India that virtually everyone who goes there experiences is that it's a full spectrum experience. You have all of life laid out in front of you, where you are experiencing the utmost extreme of wealth and the utmost extreme of poverty. You have the most epically beautiful, sublime experiences of nature, of temples, of architecture, of art, of music, of food, of dress, there's 3 different religions that were founded there. At the same time, you have, I think, 3/4 of the world's homeless population. You can check the statistic, but it's something like that. And I remember coming in contact on the street with people who had leprosy. Saw people die. not like exactly in the moment, but I remember going to a bus stop and there was a guy who had clearly just died and was just laying there next to the bench, flies all over his face and things like this. Seeing people, like a number of children that were missing limbs, begging for money. I was in Varanasi one time in a train station, and I remember the floor was like really grimy, and there was all kinds of, it's just how many people have walked through there and stuff. And there was a guy missing at least one leg. I can't recall exactly. I was there. This was in 2011 or something. He's missing one leg and he had a big open wound on the leg. And I just remember it was like dragging across the floor and he was like begging for money. And like, yeah, just the emotional experience of seeing that was, just rock your whole sense of, just, oh my, like, you don't have words, like, oh my God, how is this someone's experience of life? Like, this is where they are. They're dragging themselves on the floor with an open wound across a, like, a vile, disgusting floor in a train station here. And like, that's just like one of many things. But then of course, on the other side, you go somewhere and it is truly like of the most sublime level of architecture and food and nature and spiritual expression. And it's like this, and on the opposite end, the same thing, you are speechless. Like, how could humans have created something like this? It is so ineffable. And so you're in this place of extremes a lot of the time. And it's quite emotionally taxing. It's kind of like it's a psychedelic experience in its own respect. Or if people have been to Burning Man, I feel like it's kind of the closest thing you can get to Burning Man that's not Burning Man in some respects. But it just brings you to this place of extremity where you question so many things about why life is the way that it is, and suffering, and also just like this idea of rapture, of like how life is just spectacular, mesmerizing. And you're constantly in this place of these ups and downs. And also when you're there, there's such a different experience of boundaries. Like I remember being on the train and this guy came up to me, and so I would ride the subway. I was always into like trying to ride public transportation, and I would try to just find myself in these like weird positions and stuff. And I loved riding the train because I would just find myself in interesting interactions. And I started talking with this one guy one time on the Delhi subway. And when I was there, I was living with families. Like I spent like 3 months in Delhi. I traveled around all over the place, but I was living with the family in Delhi. I lived with the family in Kathmandu. Two different families. One was Tibetan in Bhutan, which is the Tibetan Refugee Center in Kathmandu, and then the different a Nepalese family in a different part of town several months later. So I was pretty intermixed with like the local population. Like I figured out the local bus routes to get to my school for getting to Delhi and stuff. And when I was in Delhi, and I remember being on the train with this guy, and he just became really good friends with me, talking with me really quick. And at some point he wanted to know like what time it was, and this other guy who was not related to him at all in any shape or form, he had gotten on the train after this other guy come on, who started talking to me. And the guy who was talking to me wanted to know what time it was, and the fellow was like looking at his phone, and so the other guy had to get closer, and he like just naturally put his arm around the guy who he had never met before. And the guy who had his phone out would just kind of glance at it, but didn't like think twice about it. I was like, it was cool. I'm like, if you were in New York City, you know, where I used to live, like, and you did that to somebody, you got to get jacked real fast if you did that. Like, you know, there's a different sense of boundaries. Yeah. And there was just so many moments like that. Like I was in Bodh Gaya, you know, which is the sacred site where the Buddha achieved enlightenment and so on. And this kid was showing me around. Sunil was his name. He was showing me around all over Bodh Gaya on his motorcycle, and he invited me back to his house for food. And his whole family, which was like 8 siblings and his mom, I don't recall his dad being around. He might have passed away or something. That's kind of what I'm remembering. But they all slept in one bed together, and they lived in a clay hut, and they had a dirt floor, and they slept in one giant wooden bed. And they invited me over for food, and I came and sat down with them. But the most bizarre thing was that they actually had TV in this hut. But not only did they have TV, they had like cable TV, and they were watching the movie Scary Movie. and like this to me was just like this kind of just bizarre juxtaposition of India, of like you have the mixing of the ancient with the modern, and there's something about it that's kind of like, oh my God, like they all live together in one bed. But then there's also like, it's kind of beautiful that they all live together in one bed. Like, you know, that they never feel lonely. There's never a sense of like this existential, perhaps, alienation of like, I'm this separate entity and no one understands me. Like, no, you're so close with everybody else that you're really part of a larger collective. And like that's expressed in that experience on the subway where the guy has his phone and he's just able to reach over, and the other guy's like, yeah, it's just another me on some capacity. Mm-hmm. I don't know if they went that deep with it, but like there's something to that that's ingrained in that culture, because you have like multiple religions coming out of that one small piece of land for a reason. Like there's something ingrained in the consciousness of India that is beyond just like the egoic self. And so when you're living there for, you're there for a long time, it just rubs off on you in a certain way. And you get really comfortable with discomfort, and you get really comfortable with things going haywire and all kinds of bizarre things happening and people pushing boundaries. And like, at least the way that I experienced it, it brought in like an openness to that. And that was really healing for me as well, because I had been in an environment, I feel, in the United States, university and stuff, where there was a lot of like maybe insecure egoic development arising. And going to India was like a shattering experience of that, and a celebratory shattering of that. And that was very beautiful. And of course, too, there's experience like the man with his leg and kids and so on, without, missing eyes and leprosy and stuff. And it definitely left me walking away feeling like I can't just continue in an automatic way. I was already in that place, but this was like, seal the deal. Like you have to just move forward with like an intensity about life matters, what you do matters, how you impact other people matters, what's happening to other people matters. And it's important that we are conscious in how we walk in the world, because there is a lot of suffering, but simultaneously there is also this immense opportunity for transcendence of suffering and to create something that is immaculately beyond words. And it's like, do you want to be contributing to suffering? Do you want to be contributing towards the system that makes people beg for money while literally scraping by on the floor? Or do you want to be erecting a temple of divinity that when people come in contact with it, it ruptures their whole understanding of themselves? So for me, that was kind of like, I'm putting into words now. I don't know if I had the words for all this at the time, but this is kind of like the emotional impact that it left me with. I'm reflecting on it now, like, 12, 13 years later. So
Yeah. Yeah, beautiful. So powerful. Thank you for sharing all of that. So Buddhism, I want to just go directly into it because with or without the ism, the Buddha Dharma, you even named your podcast Bodhi Speak, right? And
yeah.
And just as a practitioner, and a student, it's like there's this chance to share, I guess, on this platform what from the Dharma benefited you, and what do you find particularly inspiring, impactful? What strains or aspects of Buddhist teachings, and yeah, just basics that might also help the rest of us.
The very first thing that brought me to it was simplicity. I was studying a lot of like Western philosophy beforehand. I got really into Friedrich Nietzsche and like Michel Foucault and Jean-Paul Sartre and all these people. and which is great. There's wonderful things. I still love a lot of things that those guys had to say and other philosophers and so on. But the complexity of what they have to say, it's like, talk about finding yourself in a anxiety attack, try to understand those things. So when I came across the simplicity of Buddhism, it was just like a breath of fresh air. I was like, it can't be this simple. And not only is it simple, it's not oriented towards status or being right or fame or money. It's oriented towards peace. And I feel like that the place that I had been in with a lot of anxiety and a lot of alienation and a lot of anger, my teenage years, I was so relieved to find something that was oriented towards peace. And it was non-dogmatic, simple, non-dogmatic, oriented towards peace, and required no belief. In fact, it's almost contrary to any belief. The more you believe in it, the less effective it is, which is such a beautiful thing. I grew up in a Catholic upbringing to some extent. I don't want to get so much into that whole story, but that's maybe when I'm older, I can talk more about it on a public thing like this. But to come in contact with something that required zero belief, and if anything, it's like they say in Buddhism, is there a God? Well, it's like the question isn't even relevant. They're like, who cares? Like, it's not relevant to what's happening right now in the present moment. Are you suffering? Are you okay? You are. So let's just work on that. And I just found there's something very liberating and beautiful about that simplicity and the straight pointedness. And it's something that could be practiced at any moment of the day, irrespective of anything that's happening outside of you, which I think, to be fair, is the case with all these different traditions. The other thing that I think has really impacted me with Buddhist practice, when I did the Buddhist pilgrimage in reverse. I don't really know why I did it in reverse, but I first went to Kushinagar, which is where the Buddha died. And then from there, I went to the site of the first sermon, which is in Sarnath, next to Varanasi. And then from Varanasi, I went to Bodh Gaya. And then from Bodh Gaya, I went to Lumbini in Nepal, where he was born. I don't know why. That's just whatever. I went backwards. Who knows? And then, it's a funny thing. And then I found myself in Lumbini, and that's where I came in contact with Vipassana meditation by S.N. Goenka, which is like an even more stripped down version of Buddhism than perhaps you would get if you went to like a Theravada or a Tibetan temple or something like this. It's super stripped down. And what I got from that practice, and like allegedly this is the practice that was passed from Siddhartha Gautama to various teachers or various students that got protected and held in the lineage that was preserved in Burma. And then SN Goenka went to Burma to resolve his situation with his headaches, and then discovered the pure practice of Vipassana meditation, insight meditation, and then brought that to the world. So I did the Vipassana Center in Lumbini, and right, you sit 12 hours a day, no talking, no reading, no writing, no music, and it's 4 a.m. to like 9 p.m. And what I got out of that was like that the Buddhist practice can be like really hardcore in that you learn to sit. Like, and you learn to sit through things that are painful and are scary, or every part of you will scream to move, and you learn to control that. And there's something I've always felt that was just like really badass about that, because you're like, it really makes you tap into like the energy of being a warrior. And so that's something I always liked about the Buddhist path, is that externally you come in contact with Buddhist people who are really practice it. Allegedly, they should be very, very gentle. And that's because if they're really deep into that practice on the inner world, they're very, very fierce. And so I think that was something that I got from Buddhism, was like that there can be a fierceness to it. But it's not a fierceness that gets expressed through like anger or rage or like trying to dominate anyone or anything like this. It gets expressed through like the capacity to be very, very gentle. And I always like how people describe Thich Nhat Hanh, someone that's just like super gentle, like super gentle. But when you look about that guy's life, like he was living in a war zone for like, I don't know, 15, 20 years or something, and dealing with like the United States bombing Vietnam like crazy. Like, that person is just super hardcore, but super gentle. And so that's the last thing I'll say about it, is that it gave me this idea that you can be super gentle and super peaceful, and that can be a reflection of how fierce and strong you are inside. Something like that.
I love it. This podcast has such a Jerry flavor already, so I think we're on track. Just like, how ferociously gentle can we be? I want to highlight, just for like clarification, for when you say non-dogmatic, or it's even like contrary to belief, a couple of things about that, just to unpack that a little bit. That one aspect of Buddhism is that it deeply emphasizes experimentation and experience. So it's like directly inviting seekers to not, instead of believing things, try them and see what happens and test it out. So it has this almost scientific quality, let's say, to where the experience and the experiential growth and change in a person is the emphasis. And then if you like take on tenets to believe. I've always even found it how the word Dharma on one hand is like this really sacred thing. It's one of the three jewels. It's all the teachings. And on the other hand, it's literally also means phenomena. Like, and so there's all these teachings about all Dharma are empty, and, and so it's like, challenges my mind when I hear those teachings. Like, you're wondering, I mean, are we talking about phenomena or the teachings and practices here? Like, what are we saying to abandon? What is empty? I don't know that there's an answer in the tradition. To me, it almost feels like it's just saying everything's empty. Like, I've heard the practices described as like toys given to children to play with for a time until they're ready to come inside, and so on. So it's like so much of the teachings and practices I've encountered in Buddhist tradition are challenging us deeper and deeper to actually let go more and more of our concepts and conceptual constructs and identities and attachments to different beliefs and dogmas and so on. That's like the point of the training on some level, as far as I've encountered it as a student. So I just wanted to name that as like an illustration of what I think you might mean by non-dogmatic or not about belief, is like, yeah, just challenging and confronting us to go beyond philosophies and assumptions and ideas. Even if they're Buddhist philosophies, it's like challenges itself to like keep stripping away even those things. And they're used as like almost like, oh, there's so many forms and phenomena and they're so enticing. And then like, okay, well, look at this one, like this Buddhist forms and visualizations and phenomena and mantras, and then you go deeper into that. Now that can fall away too. And what is like reality as it is without those filters? And I don't know the answer, but that seems to be some
yeah. I mean, it's like it helps it preserve its authenticity, in the sense of like coming from perhaps like a background that I came in with Catholicism, and if someone's Catholic, that's cool. I'm not against Catholicism, but I think there's plenty of examples, in publicly speaking, where religious authorities have betrayed their constituents, to say the least. And so, to me, that's something that is really beautiful about the Buddhist tradition. Is it's like, no, we actually want you to like challenge us, and we're gonna challenge ourselves, and we're not gonna just like accept it because I'm an authority figure, so you should listen to me. It welcomes in that skepticism and questioning, and for me, that's how I know I can trust it. And like, there's a whole, without getting into a larger thing, there's a whole aspect in life about legitimate, illegitimate authority. If something's a legitimate authority, it wants to be challenged, because it's like, yeah, like go ahead and challenge it. You'll understand why this is an authority. And then there's illegitimate authority, which is like, oh no, don't ask questions. Don't look here. You can't see. Otherwise, they're hiding something. So that to me is like really what you're talking about there, where it tries to deconstruct even its own concepts. It preserves the authenticity of it. And yeah, that's just a very beautiful thing. And that's what's always really brought me back to it, is how clean it is in that sense. And like, this is more of a joke than an observation, but it's like, you think about, all the different religions out there, and when you get people that are like quote unquote fundamentalists of their religion, they're always trying to kill people. Like how often you ever hear about like a Buddhist fundamentalist decides to blow up a building? I mean, it's just like a pretty, you just don't hear much about that kind of stuff. And I feel like that there's something to it.
Right. And they're also, and I don't want to, no, and I also just want to say that it's the deeper point you're making is about what's the real religion in the sense of unity and insight, as opposed to religion in the sense of fundamentalism and separatism. Because there have been, I do want to honor that there have been some cases of like Buddhist violence and so on, but
sure there has been.
But my point is like, you're still right, because it's not, the whole point is like, what do you call that? Is it Buddhist violence? Like, are you really a Christian if you're blowing people up? Like,
of course
for
not.
Christianity and so on.
Or Islam, it's really, or Judaism, or Hinduism. I mean, you're total. I mean, that's why I gave the precursor as kind of a joke. But.
And I think that's actually that's a good point actually to make psychologically, like as we move into AI and like this idea that money's the root of evil and all these types of things, whether it's religion or money or technology, like these are amplifiers. And it's how we use things, right? And so like humans can take their inner world of hatred and greed and like use a religion, let's say, as an excuse to do more of that, or technology as an amplifier to blow people up, or money and so on. But they're not, those are just like external tools. It's like what matters is who's wielding it and how are they using it. So
yeah, and your point too, your point too is like, is the person really Christian if they're doing that?
Right.
Like, no, I mean, I just think that's a beautiful thing, because people are like, oh, the Christians are doing this, or Jewish people are doing that, or Muslims are doing this. And it's like, really, like, there's one religion, which is there's the peaceful people. And then there's like the people that aren't being peaceful, which I'm not trying to create a differentiation there, but that's just been kind of a thought in my mind as we've watched these like religious wars like unfold. Is you're like, really, the religion is peace. It doesn't really matter what name it is, or what practice it is, or who started it. It's like, if you're following the way of peace, then you're in my religion, regardless of what clothing or what costume you're wearing or what hat you have on or whatever. And I think like that might be just an interesting thing perhaps for people to think about, is that like, oh, are you following the religion of peace? Oh, okay. Because you can say like, I'm following this religion, but if it's not peaceful, like, are you really? Like, of course not. So.
Yeah, I want to say maybe last thing on Buddhism that I love that's still on this topic of deconstructing concepts. And I'm not enough of an expert to get the intricacies of the terminology. I believe what I'm about to share is related to the skandhas, but there's different layers and terms to fully explain it. But I love this understanding and the teaching in Buddhism I've encountered that there's like, if we I would explain it this way. It's like if we zoom in on time and we kind of deconstruct time differently than how we're perceiving it with our human brains, there's a lot more happening in one span of time than we realize. So let's say I pick up this so-called pen. It's like, well, actually, I'm not picking up a pen. There's all this stuff happening along the way. And it's like, and a lot of Buddhism is about working with the mind and understanding the mind, right? And how is the mind actually making reality, and how is maybe the universe is mind made on some level? Because I pick up a pen, but if I pause, like to the level of a perhaps an expert Buddhist meditator, they start to notice like, oh, what's happening is I'm having this sensation and then my mind is labeling it pen, and that's just this word, and that's like I'm labeling everything, and then I have a like or a dislike maybe even before I name it, and I just like am averted from the pen, or I'm craving more pen because I like pens, and so I'm doing all these things in my mind and adding all these different aggregates of illusion on top of what's happening really, really quickly. Of I like it, I don't like it, I want more, I want less, I want to get away, or I want to come towards that. And then beyond that, I'm like constructing all of these things of like, oh, the pen is solid and I can't bend the pen, or I can't bend the spoon, or it's just for eating, it's not for playing spoons, or it's just for writing, it's not for some other thing that some ingenious in 500 years is going to invent with this pen. So it's like, there's so many limitations we're setting so quickly, constantly on all our perceptions. And if we got past that and learn to pause in those moments between, we could maybe come closer to what's real and what is, maybe an even better way to say it, before all those constructs. So that's one of the things I love about Buddhism, is it's challenging our minds, or the Buddhist practices and teachings, I feel, are challenging our minds to come like closer and closer to direct experience as it is.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Do you want to share any last thoughts on this?
Maybe one quick thing. One thing that was coming to me was, when you were sharing that, I was thinking how, at the same time, while it's simple, there also can be these very complicated philosophical discussions that unfold. And at the same time, I was listening to Brother Fapu, who was Thich Nhat Hanh's, I don't know if his mentor is the word, but he lived with Thich Nhat Hanh as an assistant for like 15 years or something when he was a monk, and he's now one of the head, I think he's the head abbot at Plum Village now. But he was saying how one thing that Thich Nhat Hanh would always comment on is how, like, a lot of times the best Buddhist scholars are sometimes some of the worst practitioners. And so something that can be helpful, because you can get into these philosophical conversations about things, and it's like, and this also can be, I'll pause it for a second with that. But it's more about not knowing. Like, if you can just sink into not knowing, something arises that is more profound than anything within the philosophical discussion ever can lead us to. And a lot of people, I think, have accused like Thich Nhat Hanh, for instance, of being like too simple. And I just think that's a funny thing. And I appreciate that, because there's just something in that that is quite liberating. And I like that idea, though, that like one could be a terrible scholar and that can make them a phenomenal practitioner. And being a good scholar doesn't mean that you're a bad practitioner necessarily, but like sometimes there is something where you're too much in the mind, where it can prevent you from just coming into that simple awareness of the presence of what's happening. And I think that's something that because what was coming to me was like, wow, like this can be, thinking about like the depth of the Buddhist philosophical world can be like quite intimidating in certain ways. But then I do think that there's something really powerful when you have someone like Thich Nhat Hanh come in, who's like a teacher of the tradition, and they just strip it all away and they're like, just focus on your breathing, nothing more than that. So that's just what kind of came to me as I was reflecting on that.
Yeah, I feel like more comfortable if I misquote whatever I'm about to say, because maybe it just means I'm a bad scholar. But there's that book Dream Yoga by a Tibetan teacher who's also in Bon tradition partially, And he talks about something similar to what you're saying right now, where the theory can be very, very illuminating, literally, like the philosophy and the teachings. And I believe, and I could be very wrong, but I believe it's just about like the balance of, if you have too much like sunlight, let's say, on a leather that you're supposed to also like work and rub butter into it and so on to keep it soft and pliable. But then if it's just the intellectual insights, it can just like turn hard and rigid and just be the outer form. So I might have totally butchered that metaphor just now, but it was something.
You're saying, though.
Yeah. Anyways, I want to maybe just bookmark this by saying that Thich Nhat Hanh, who you've been talking about, I love his book, Old Path, White Clouds, so much. And I feel like Zen, which he was a Zen practitioner and teacher, Zen master, represents like that crystalline simplicity in many ways of some of the more esoteric dimensions of Buddhism. And then there's also Vajrayana, which I know you love, like Pema Chodron, and I went to Naropa, is founded by Trungpa, and so on. And if you're more into like the bone shamanistic influences and like the different dimensions and deities and advanced practices and things, and you want to get more complicated like that, then Vajrayana, the Buddhist Tantra, has a whole nother kind of corpus of stuff for people to dive into. So I guess I just wanted to name that too.
And it's all good. I mean, that's the other thing. I feel like just learning as you get older, you're just like, whatever works for somebody, if it brings you to peace, it brings you to compassion and happiness, then like, who's to judge that?
Totally. Love it. So I want to get into a few other topics here. Let's see what we can do. This is kind of what I predicted. You and I'd have a lot to talk about. So let's see what we can get to.
I feel like we barely said anything so far.
I know. Well, I do want to say, so you said your mission, it sounded like, is about service to others and being service oriented. And I want to kind of endorse Jerry Walsh and Ishel Prisma on air and say that you guys do a lot of high level service to many, many people for a long time. And I've seen you in service to a lot of people. And I want to begin exploring some of the ways that you do that. And so I want to get into practices that you like to work with, such as cold immersion, hot cold therapy, breath work, and the different ways we can expand our consciousness through those types of practices. If there's anything you want to share about that and what that type of discipline has brought to your life, any insights as a facilitator of those things?
Sure. So specifically within hot and cold, yeah?
Hot and cold and breath work and like the altered states that these types of practices bring about. Yeah.
Well, I first got into cold water in 2011 after I came back from South Asia. So I guess it's kind of a good place to pick up. My aunt and uncle, or my aunt in particular, is the co-vice president of the Coney Island Polar Bear Club. It's been around for like 100 years. And I jumped in the ocean with them on New Year's Day. Not New Year's Day. Was it New Year's Day? Yeah, I don't remember. It wasn't New Year's Day because that was different. But anyways, it was around 2012, 2011. And I went in the ocean. I mean, it was cold, man. It was like very bitter cold outside New York City and the ocean. And I mean, I remember going in there. I was in there for 12 minutes to start. And I'd never done that before. Yeah, I maybe jumped in like a kind of cool mountain stream before, like in the summer or something. But straight up jumping in the ocean, I was actually, I think it was February that we did it, and it was freaking cold. It was really cold, and we in there for 12 minutes. And I remember then, like, in the way the Coney Island Polar Bear Club is, like, you get out of the ocean, then you got to walk back to the Coney Island Aquarium, which is I don't know, like 300 yards away, and you're walking back, and it feels like your feet become ice cubes, and you lose sensation in your hands and your feet. They just go completely numb. But I remember, this just sounds kind of nuts, but I think there's tons of wonderful literature that people have been exposed to, podcasts, all kinds of information and things now become very popular in the mainstream about why to do this practice. I think there's tons of stuff out there. I don't think that I need to list off all the scientific benefits, but like the main thing I think to take away from it is what it does in the process of showing you that how artificial your limits are as a person, and how then you take those artificial limits and you just impose them all over your life and your relationships, in your own disciplinary practices, within the way that you eat, the way that you sleep, the way that you talk, the way that you relate to everything. Is you're constantly just putting up limits that just aren't real. And then you can find yourself in a situation where you just feel debilitated and held down by life, and you feel like a victim, and you can get into a complete narrative of like, poor me, why did this person do this to me, and like in the Dhammapada, right, the teachings of the Buddha, look at how he beat me, robbed me, and abused me. It's like, hold on to these thoughts and you will forever just be tormented, and like, let go of them. And the issue with, I think, perhaps, like you said, for instance, in the Buddhist tradition, a lot of it's working with the mind. But it was interesting when we were in Karnataka and South India, we went to inauguration hall for the Dalai Lama and all this stuff. He came down there. And I remember one of the monks was telling us in their tradition, like, that mind for them is not differentiated between like spirit and emotion and the heart and the body. Like, it's all mind. Just an interesting thing to think about. And, so it can be, I think when people come across those teachings, they can be like, I just need to think differently. And you do, but it's not just that. You need to experience everything differently to understand that something different is possible if you've been completely stuck within your conditioning, like, and you haven't had a opportunity to glance beyond that. And so cold water is just a phenomenal and very fierce and gracious teacher for showing you how incredibly capable you are and how much stronger you are than you ever could have possibly believed. And the heat is like this too, but there's something, I think, at least for myself and a lot of other people I observe, kind of relaxing about getting into the heat. And that's really good, therapeutic, and important. But there's something just incredibly like scary about getting in cold water. Like, it's scary. It's still, there's still times where I go to do it and you're like, I'm really going to go do this right now. Okay. Especially when, like, we make the extra trip to go to some of these spots down by the river in the wintertime, and you're like, okay, we're going to go do this. But, what the other thing that happens when you get in there is every aspect of your system flips on. Everything. Your adrenaline levels go through the roof, your capacity to focus, and you are brought extraordinarily deep into the present moment and what's happening with just in your own breath. And in that process, you're able to let go of so many things that perhaps have been bombarding you and you felt have been holding you down. And you're able to feel your feelings. You're able to feel completely alive. And like, I'm a huge, huge fan of Joseph Campbell. Just absolutely love the way he articulates things. And he says, like, a lot of people think that you're looking for meaning, but that's not really what life is about. Life is about finding the experience of being most fully alive and making your own heartbeat match the heartbeat of the universe. And I would say to anybody, like, if you are, I think that he was talking also, he focused a lot on the arts and spiritual practices. And like, I think if you can find a way to make that connection through music and arts and, your spiritual life and have those synthesized, that's awesome. If you're struggling to find that connection and you just want to know what it's like to have your heartbeat match the heartbeat of the universe, go trump in the cold river and you'll definitely feel your heartbeat in a deep way that you've never felt before. So, yeah, my mic's being a little funny. Can you hear my voice?
I can hear you great.
Cool. Yeah, and I mean, the heat does the same thing. And there's something really magical. A friend of mine was telling me when you combine the two together, because you have, it's almost like if you're taking a plunger and you are creating a suction, like the cold takes it one way, and then you have this plunger effect from the heat where all of a sudden you get this massive release going the opposite way. And in that process of having this massive fluctuation within the cardiovascular system, within the lymphatic system, within the hormonal system, because you have different hormones and chemicals that are released. For instance, adrenaline, you have dopamine, prolactin is specifically connected with heat. When you have this up and down in an extreme way, what I have found just in my own personal experience, it brings you to a place of immense balance and immense stillness. So they're wonderful combined together. And of course, breath work, doing that ahead of time as well, um, allows you to really be in the proper state of consciousness preemptively, so that when you get into the experience, which is going to overwhelm you, that's the whole point of it, you can begin to calm and train the mind and cultivate a stillness ahead of time. And this becomes a wonderful tool that you can utilize outside of this experience. So that's kind of the main takeaway. It's like you can have this flushing of your system, be brought into the present moment, get the understanding that you are capable of so much more. But then the almost like the more important thing than all of that is you start to cultivate a firmness of mind with how you relate to stress. And so people think like stress is bad, but if you adopt the mindset stress is good, you will affirm that. And if you can then take this practice of meeting stress with like a connection with your breath and a connection with like the depth of your system, then right action will arise. And you'll find yourself in situations where maybe you were emotionally reactive and volatile, whether that's being angry or afraid or a combination. And instead, you might just be more like, I'm going to use a conscious, strategic approach now on how to handle this person or situation. And, within that pause, within that moment where you're connected to your breath and you're just feeling what's happening as opposed to just letting your feelings take you, that's the only real freedom I think that there is at the end of the day. Is that moment where you can be like, I can choose to either keep going the path of being totally unconscious and insane, or I can try something different.
Yeah. This is rich. This is important stuff, taking responsibility for our reaction to external stimuli, which ties back to everything we were just talking about. But in that discipline is actual freedom, instead of just wallowing in conveniences while feeling more and more dissatisfied. Um, so I love it, and yeah, there's always so much more we could go into here, but it does, I want to say, tie back, because that same aversion and craving we were just talking about, it's like you run from the extreme of the cold, you want warmth, but you go to the extreme of the heat, you want cold. And it's like when we see that and we just are present with the way it is and accept it and stay there, then like it makes us enjoy the in between all the more, and relax more deeply and with more and more intensity and stressors without getting distressed and so on.
Yeah, and then if someone has the opportunity, right, to sit like in a traditional native sweat lodge, like you're going through this process while you're praying for your relationships. And so I think the takeaway from something like that is that you then go home and your relationships are like the most insane ice bath, sweat lodge situation you possibly can imagine if you have kids. I have a 4-year-old. And to be like, to have that meditation in conjunction with the stressor will then allow you to go back home and to be in a place where you can say, okay, like I need to be like praying for this person. I need to be in service to this person, not reacting to them. And like, so just how the mindset around this type of work is a huge component. So, our teacher, Maestro Manuel, loves to talk about how like yoga is not exercise. And it's like people are too caught up in the physical. And like, I think this is what he's getting at is, people, especially like the cold plunge, right, has become this very popular thing. Like, oh, you can just jump in the ice bath. But then, you look at how the native traditions like approach these things. They brought a whole ritual and ceremonial aspect to it, so that when you're in there, they're also guiding you to think about your relationships and to think about it in a humble way and how you impact people. And so that when you leave there, you're not just like, oh, I just did this crazy thing and I can just continue to behave in the way that I was. But instead you're like, oh, I just went through this meditation about like, how am I caring for the people around me? And like, I know it's stressful, but like, that's what leads us to this place of what I'm trying to reach, the mountaintop of where the elders are sitting. So just to share, like, I think that when it comes to these practices, it's important to be honoring and connecting and understanding like where these things are rooted in, traditionally speaking, because there's a whole other like depth that people in like the modern world have kind of like they've taken like the yoga the physical practice and like ignored everything else, all the ethical precepts and then like the the things pertaining to
Yeah.
like diet and so on. I could go on with it, but you
And
know.
And the same thing happens now with like the type of trendy wellness stuff that you were just pointing out, that it's become mainstream, the breath work, the cold plunge, etc. But maybe the ancient ceremonial knowledge of how to approach those things is an important factor to preserve in addition to the modern science. Because for instance, like nervous system regulation, it's super catchy. Everybody wants to know how to regulate their nervous system. It's like, yeah, that is the point. But what does it look like to regulate your nervous system, not just in the moment when you're on a wellness retreat and you get in the cold water, but like to become more solutions oriented in your life and in the world and so on, like to become a problem solver in the bigger sense and those bigger challenges and so on. Yeah.
And to have like ethics attached to it. Like
Right.
that, that's also a big component of it, because it's like, for instance, like the military trains people through cold exposure, but
Right.
like, okay,
What's
is that
power without wisdom? What's knowledge without
yeah,
compassion and empathy? Right.
well
Yeah.
said.
Yeah. So, good stuff. Also, I wanted to quickly, just because this is a fun thing you brought to mind, you're mentioning the traditional approaches. I just want to say, so my family is from Ukraine, and I grew up with like a kind of traditional Russian speaking nanny helping take care of me. And from my earliest childhood memories, we do this very old Russian tradition called zakalyatsa, which I think it's kind of like, it's almost a reference to like acupuncture, like to puncture yourself, to like get. I don't know how to explain the etymology, but it literally just means everyone, including the kids, are supposed to get in cold water at the end of all their baths and showers and stuff. So I grew up with that, and these are like old worldwide knowledge if you go to those roots. So I just wanted to name that too.
Nice. You guys would do that after you would take a warm bath. They would like demand that you go in like ice water or something like that.
Yeah, it was just one of those, like how you raise kids. You just pour a bucket of cold water over his head when he's done with the bath, and then you wrap him up in the blanket. It's just, I don't know. It's an old Russian thing. But yeah, I did want to say one, in case you had any quick words on one last example of these types of exercises for people's well-being, that fasting is another one I know you're into. And so if you want to name anything about fasting as another example before we move on, to go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was introduced to fasting by native traditions, and wow, like I don't understand how people don't do it, to be honest with you. Like instruction that we have, and there's been different instructions given at different times and so on and so forth. But what the one that I've heard that resonates most with me is like 24 hours, no food, only water once a week. For me, 36 hours is like the magic number once a week. And then doing a couple longer ones, 3 to 5 days, a couple times a year. And what I find, I mean, invite people, whoever is skeptical of it. I imagine most people listen to your podcast have practiced it, but if they haven't and they're skeptical, just read about it. There's an infinite amount of information about fasting, and it's incredible, all the things about it. I mean, it cures epilepsy, for instance, or it's a treatment for epilepsy, which is what all antidepressant medication is derived from, for instance. Not a coincidence. So fasting is like kind of like the fountain of youth in a lot of ways. The main thing that I would say is like, I had an experience one time where, like, during my Saturn return, when I was like 28 or something like that, I was going through some challenging circumstances, and I remember getting depressed, and I hadn't been depressed for like several years, and it was kind of a foreign but familiar feeling. I was like, wow, I'm depressed again. This is interesting. It hasn't happened in a long time. And I tried so many things, and I couldn't get out of it, and it was like pretty overwhelming, and I just decided to stop eating. And I remember, like, right when I hit the 24-hour mark, a buddy of mine, our friend Chris, he called me and he was like, "Hey, you doing okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, I haven't eaten for 24 hours. I just feel good." And I remember, like, nothing had changed in my circumstances, like nothing. It was just all of a sudden there was an internal space where before everything was just stuffed up. And it was like food was just like shoveling more dirt on the problem. And it's like, yeah, it's uncomfortable to fast. It isn't. I always find it uncomfortable at some moment during it. but like the spaciousness that it brings and the emotional flow and the equanimity and the capacity just to be like, do I want to make that decision? You know, that spaciousness that you're always looking for. It whenever it arises, I'm like, how come people aren't doing this? You know, I mean, which a lot of people are doing it, to be fair, but I just think about it. I'm like, you know, why is this not something that's more known
Yeah.
about the emotional clearing component of it? Like, and yeah,
How,
there's the go
yeah.
ahead.
How come the people that might need it most aren't doing
Yeah.
it? Let's say that. Yeah.
Exactly. And yeah, it's just it's truly like been a miracle practice for me where like, you know, I've done all kinds of different things, like let's say throughout a couple day period, like exercise, lift weights, run, yoga, meditation, social positive social experiences like service work and stuff, and still kind of feeling maybe like a little raw, and then you stop eating and it's just like so much calmness arises and like so much stillness. And yeah, I think that this is just something that a consumer culture could just benefit from immensely, because
Yeah.
we're not only overly saturated with like food, but just overly saturated with stimulation. And
Hmm.
that's one of the beautiful things that happens, especially when you do multi-day fast, is like you just have to quit. Like you don't you don't have a choice. You just have to stop. Like there's a moment where you are just brought, whether you want to or not, into a place of stillness. Is my mic getting weird again?
The volume just went down a little bit.
Yeah, this mic's being a little funny. I don't know. I was doing that to me last night.
It's okay.
But long story short is just, you know, the fasting, it just forces the brakes on you. And like when you're in a culture and an environment that's constantly trying to go more, 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 and more, that is extraordinarily important to have a moment where you just stop and you can just really look at what's happening in your life internally and externally and actually assess it. And that's a scary thing to do. Like I at times find myself like afraid to stop, and there's this aspect of like we need to control everything, and fasting is just a wonderful way for us to like really just let go of the need to control everything and the need to be stimulated, the need to be entertained, the need to consume, and just be able to be a human being. You know, like I'm just being. I don't need to accomplish anything. I don't need to become better at anything. I don't need to improve anything. I don't need to accumulate anything. I can just be and just appreciate life. And then the wonderful thing is that out of that like appreciation, really great decisions come. And like and then you find yourself just like being an uplifting presence for people.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much more I could say about it, but like, I think that's maybe a good place just to yeah, for now, unless you had
Yeah.
another question about it or something.
No, this is great. I want to actually also name that, just like we were talking about with the other practices, fasting is also this fascinating microcosm. And I'm kind of realizing this as I was listening to you speak, where we're learning to abstain from something that we might crave or want in that moment, even just like physically or biologically. And that's
Mm.
such an incredible training ground, like a microcosm for other things that we struggle with, especially in modern society where we have so many easy options. And so I just think that it could be good to highlight that like fasting could be used as a practice round for what does it then look like to like let go of some vice that you're really like attached to, but you don't actually want to keep doing that habit that may be like dragging you down at the same time or something. And so I think that that can be liberating as a, and it's like similar, you know, to just reflecting in general, like what are we consuming, whether it's food or otherwise, what kind of content, media, visual, auditory, through our senses, and also just kind of blurring the artificial lines too between what we think of as like food and medicine and drugs. Like these are all, everything is a substance we're consuming in some sense, and it's all altering our psyche in some way. And from the very beginning, when we first start breathing and drinking milk and so on, we're already interacting with the physical world and elements, and they're influencing us. And so what does it look like to go back to those first foods, those first medicines like air, like water. Like these are things that do influence us, like what is in the water, what is in the air. These are all affecting our psyche. And what does it look like to go to those most basic foods, those most basic drugs we're taking on some level all the time, and like learn to abstain from them and be sober from food for a period, for example. So anyways, that's what was coming to mind as you shared there.
Oh yeah, I mean that thank you for saying that, because that's a huge important part of it, is that you start to develop like self-control around areas of your life that maybe you didn't even realize you needed self-control over that. But all of a sudden, like, you're in a highly, because when you fast too, I mean, like, just viscerally speaking and perception, you become very amplified. It's like you take a substance almost, and like you do start to just see things differently. I mean, it's the same thing as like culture shock or like a psychedelic thing or something in its own respect. And like I remember the first time I did 3 days fasting. um there was more to it than that, but I remember coming back to eat for the first time. I think I was 19, and I went in my house and I went to go get some Kraft macaroni and cheese. That's like the first thing I went for. And I went to grab it and I was like, I immediately just stopped. And I was like, whoa, like, I eat this stuff to cope with unprocessed emotional problems that I have. That's why I'm choosing to eat this garbage. It was just like, it hit me like a ton of bricks. And it took years still to like get out of that habit. And like, for the record, I'm not knocking Kraft macaroni and cheese.
Yeah.
I think it's very tasty in some way, but like, it will take you years to like fully shift the paradigm of whatever thing you're stuck in to be able to like actually make healthy choices. But yeah, to do something, in a responsible way, like fasting like that, it can just be like pretty shattering and just awakening to like how unconscious you are around certain things. I just remember it was just like whoa. The only reason I'm eating this is because what had happened right prior to that moment is I had this huge emotional release that I hadn't had for years, just like crying from the whole thing, from the fasting and all this stuff. And then I remember after it like passed, I was like, I need to eat now. And then I was like, whoa, I'm eating this because I just had been I'm eating garbage because I felt like garbage inside.
Yeah.
Like, wow.
Our mutual friend Z, who runs the farm there, and when he and I used to live on a mountain together in Peru, and when we were there, we'd meet up in the little kitchen in the mountains where we'd eat breakfast, and he'd like pile a giant bowl of oatmeal with all this stuff on it. And we had this running joke about how it was our birth trauma, and we were just like eating our birth trauma every day. Anyways,
I was just chainsawing a ton of wood with Z today.
I love it. Yeah. Also, in case this podcast ever gets big enough, Kraft, don't sue us. We still support Kraft. And
yeah.
I have one or two last questions or topics here. This second to last one was going to be like 10, but I think we'll just group them all together. Music, creativity, sound healing. This is a huge part of, and one of my favorite things about Jerry. You do throat singing, beatboxing, didgeridoo. You're involved with Dig Project. You're also involved with Dream Seed and sound healing, with different world indigenous instruments and so on, and have done sound baths here with us in Colorado. But one of my favorite things about Jerry is not just that you're yet another throat singing sound healer, but you're very artistic with it. You're not only doing it as a healing art, but you're doing it as an art, like deeply. You're an artist, you know what I mean? So I just wanted to invite you to share about both sides of that, artistry and yeah, what that is for you.
Mm-hmm. Specifically with throat singing or just music?
Well, I'm going to invite you to probably share some examples here, but really this was going to be 10 different questions. So it's up to you which ones you want to focus on. Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't start doing music until 2012, which for me doesn't feel like very long ago. I always thought music was for like people that went to school for music and were trained to be musicians and understood things technically about music. And then I came across the indigenous traditions, and I slowly discovered that anyone who feels called to express themselves in a real way, in a certain connection, is a musician and can be an artist. And like, that was very exciting to me. And I discovered there were so many different instruments that one could play that you do not need to be technically knowledgeable in order to make incredible sounds out of them. And I've since become like a teacher of this modality to some extent, you could say, through Dream Seed in our community here. And I oftentimes tell people that are coming to study with us, we had a program now that starts actually Saturday, sound healer training program, is teaching all types of this modality of music. Tell people like it might be better you actually don't have much experience, because then that's not going to get in the way of your real, spontaneous, genuine, authentic connection and expression. And like, yeah, anything can be refined and should be to some, that's like on the path to mastery. But so the first thing I learned to play was the didgeridoo. And the didgeridoo, by playing it, you can sing through it. And I started to use my voice through it. And then I went, whoa, this feels really, really good. Like, it cleared so much anxiety for me and a lot of like social inhibition and self-doubt and just all the negative things, neuroses and stuff. And I remember just feeling like super connected to my heart, because when you sing through the didge, you need to match the pitch of the instrument. I was playing with one that was pretty low in key, and it was like, it brought me into this like really deep voice that I could feel like a vibration through my whole chest. When you play the didge, that doesn't really happen, but if you sing through it, that'll happen. I was like, wow, singing is super incredible. And then being involved in different like song circles and so on, and like in healing works and so on, where the voice is really guiding the experience, and in a group experience as well. And just learning through osmosis, as Maestro Manuel would say, like, you just pick up from being around other people and absorbing that group vibration and being able to like come in and out of it without it being like I'm on the spot. It's not a performance. It's not about sounding good or bad. It's just about like connecting with that vibration, with your own vibration. Same thing of like making your heartbeat match the heartbeat of the universe. And like a lot of these, especially like the Native American songs, can be like very simple in the vocable chanting because they're heart-centered songs. They're not about like, complex situations and crazy instruments that are there's like simple things like a rattle and a drum and then your voice, and that's it. And anyone can do that. And finding, many different flutes, and then discovering the handpan, that was a pretty like whimsical thing. I had a friend who was a didge player, and she actually she had the opportunity to purchase an original pan art hong drum from Switzerland. She had to go to the place and write the whole letter to get invited to go there. And she bought one, and she wound up asking me if I wanted to buy it, like, several years after she purchased it. And I had about $2,000 to my name, and I gave her all the money that I had, which was $2,000, and I had $0 in my bank account. But then I had an original pan art hong drum, and the hong drum was a pretty big breakthrough for me. I started to just really kind of like, because with that, any handpan, all of the notes are in harmony with each other within the format of a scale, so you can't hit a wrong note. And so it's this very like interesting circular design that makes you feel like the brain, where you can crisscross and hit different hemispheres and patterns and so on. And it's this very like spontaneous, freewheeling type of playing that brings itself to a lot of creativity and opened a lot of doors for me to get kind of like rap, to beatbox with it, throat sing with it. And during this exact same time, I had the opportunity to go up through, I came across a hip hop nonprofit through my friend Anna Diorio, and they were teaching beatboxing to like kids up in the Bronx. And I got invited to go as like just to get trained. And I got trained by Mark Martin and Kayla Milady. Mark Martin was like the American beatbox champion at that time, and Kayla Milady was like the female world beatbox champion. And my friend Amit, who I talked to a couple of days ago, which is kind of cool. He's in the beatbox house, and he's just like a epic world-class beatboxer. And I got to spend time with them and like hang out with them on the subway and stuff. They were just like always beatboxing, and it was just, they were like just such epic people to be around. And we would go up to the Bronx, and we were teaching disabled kids who had mental and physical disabilities, oftentimes both. And it was it was such a humbling experience because, like, you know, I go to beatbox and I wasn't very good, and and I'm next to like the female beatbox world champion and like Amit and Mark, and they're doing like the craziest sounds and stuff and things that are like so complicated. And I kind of sucked, but I brought my hong drum with me. I would like do it with that. And I remember there was this one kid there named Angel, and I was 18 at the time, so it was like all different age groups because when the kids had different mental and physical disabilities, they put them all together in the same classroom. And I hit the hong drum, and he was blind mentally. He was visually blind, but also mentally disabled, and had a physical disability as well. But when I hit the hong drum in the center note, he's like, "That's in the key of D minor," and he had perfect pitch. And you're like, "What? How is that possible?" And I remember Kayla's like, "Oh yeah, Angel, he's got like perfect pitch, man. He's like, and he could play the piano, and he loved playing the I think it was like the Long Island Islanders, the hockey team, their theme song or something like that on the piano." Yeah. And then we would beatbox for them with that. And there was a couple other kids who would beatbox because we were teaching it, obviously, and they've been doing it for a couple of years in the program. And I remember being so moved at how like actually pretty good some of these kids were. And for me, it built up a lot of confidence where like I felt kind of like pretty whack at beatboxing and just music in general. But then I was around these kids and I was like, man, these kids have so many obstacles, but like they're able to do it. Like they sound pretty good. So like maybe I should stop judging myself so much. And like it kind of gave me like a sense of like affirmation. I was like, I was inspired by them like deeply. And then, you know, I learned some technical stuff here and there, and I still don't think my beatboxing is as good as it could be. It's a little bit more amorphous because I haven't spent a lot of time in like the hip hop like cypher environment as I would have liked. But just to share that component of things, how it's coming, I just always think that was such a special opportunity to spend time with them. And I got the opportunity to teach and have taught a number of different programs for kids and stuff, teaching beatboxing. And yeah, then when it comes to throat singing, I had the opportunity to come across a number of different throat singing teachers. One guy, Steve Scalar, up in Oregon, just met him at a Dig Festival and had the opportunity to work with him for like an hour or so. But just in that hour, like a lot of things I felt were transmitted to me that I was able to understand. And then a friend of mine, Mikko Heikenpoika from Finland, phenomenal throat singer and teacher. He won a competition in Tuva on combining the loop station with it. And I actually brought him to the United States. I think it was his first time here in 2017. I think you were there too, Yash. Maybe you met Mikko. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And he's, I mean, like world-class musician. He's done some stuff with like Suhan and things. He's pretty epic. He's played at like Boom Festival in Portugal. And he taught me a lot of things. He's excellent teacher too. And then a year later, we brought Alash Ensemble, who are all traditional Tuvans. And one of the guys from Alash was on like the Chevy Chase show when he was in like 9 years old or something. And he's doing Sagut, which is like the high whistling throat singing sound on the Chevy Chase show. And it's amazing, blowing people's mind. And they came and they taught a workshop as well. And I remember they asked me to come up and like demonstrate. They were kind of like, yeah, let's see, can you actually do it? Because I put out videos and stuff, things of me doing it, probably, you know, being honest, perhaps a little prematurely before I could really do it. And to my own surprise, though, they said I was doing it correctly. But they did say the main thing I needed to focus on was like really sustaining and holding it for a long time. And then once I got that just small bit of information, I feel like I was able to take it to a whole other level. And nonetheless, whenever I've been in the presence of the Tuvan masters doing it, I feel very much like a small little child learning and doing throat singing. Even though I feel confident and it's good, when I hear them do it, I'm like, these guys are just on a whole other plane of reality that I don't know how you begin to scratch the surface of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, then also, of course, Dream Seed, like you mentioned, I mean, just having the opportunity to play with people such as AJ and Brooke, and then my wife, Ishel, and so on. And you know, Maestro Manuel and our community, like just learned so much music from everybody there. So yeah, I've been in really like a very deep dive container for 13 years. So although maybe I haven't been doing it for the longest time, it's been a very condensed study around it in a very non-formal type of way, but really through just transmission and osmosis, and then just being like, I'm kind of a wacky person, I'm just gonna make crazy sounds and like see what happens. And if it comes out whack, that's what happens, and if it doesn't, then okay, I'll just have more confidence in myself and keep going. And fortunately, I've had more experiences on the latter side.
Yeah. Speaking of the artistry, and one thing I should tell you is I just got a looper, so I'm going to start learning, because you make great music with the loop stations. So you're an inspiration. Awesome. We'll see what happens. Also, you inspired me on several fronts with that whole share. One is you're making me think we should book Johnny Buffalo again. And maybe next time you will be here, even though you said you don't want to get on stage because of the skill level. I think that, you also said you want to be around some more hip hop artists. So we'll book another Heartfire hip hop lineup next time and bring you and make sure you're there. And that'll be fun, man. I know Matt Canale was here for that one that Maestro Manuel also came to here in Colorado a few years ago, but we had like a whole hip hop lineup, and we were like up recording music in the yurt with all the headliners and Matt and Adrian at night. It was pretty hilarious. So I think next time we do something like that, we got to bring you so that we can all be freestyling and beatboxing and stuff together.
Sounds good to me. I'm into it.
Yeah. And at the same time, I'm also, we have an ongoing conversation about Dig Project and tribal rhythms and the sound healer training, and we can explore that here too in Colorado. And I guess I'm just mentioning it on the recording in case we end up scheduling something for 2026, then people can keep an eye out for that.
Definitely.
And Louis Burns was just here, and hopefully we'll keep working with him in Colorado, maybe Australia, who knows. So
Louis is phenomenal.
Yeah, we just went on a whole Southwest tour together since the last time I saw you, which was a lot of fun. So I'm going to invite you, before we transition to our last closing thoughts, to treat us with a little beatbox and or throat singing, ideally both. We've had various hip hop artists and other musicians on the podcast before. We usually get some rhymes. Sometimes we get beatbox samples. So whatever you feel like sharing for a moment.
Cool. I'm happy to do it. As I was telling you before, like when I beatbox into this mic, from my experience, it just sounds pretty weird. So although you told me on the other end sounds good, so I'm just going to roll with that. But I'll start with some throat singing. So I'll start with this style of, I'll just do some throat singing. We don't get all the technical stuff. Technical stuff can come later if you have questions. There you go.
Hey, that was epic, legendary, so good. I'll save my technical questions for when I finally get around to taking classes from you.
No problem.
Um, yeah, but I do still plan to do that, so I'll save them for then.
Cool.
Yeah, well, this is so rich. It's been such a good journey. I'm so glad you came on the podcast. Thank you for doing it. I I noticed you said you didn't start studying music until 2012, 13 years ago, which made me think that you must have been waiting until the end of the world, and then after the world ended, you started studying music.
Celebrate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was actually the last theme I wanted to
Well, maybe
invite. And yeah, go ahead.
maybe to share one thing. I mean, I feel like I have a podcast and I've talked a lot about like Buddhism and all kinds of things on it. I haven't really talked a lot about music on there, for at least I don't think I have. But just since you're asking me questions about things like music for me, like wow, like what it has done for my life. And like I would just encourage people listening, like just try to find a way to express yourself through sound. Let's not even say music, to express yourself through sound. Like the doorways that it opens up in your body. I mean, like throat singing is like a very dramatic example. Like the vibration of what it does, you're like, whoa, it just takes you to another dimension completely. But even a wind instrument, something as simple to play as a Native American flute or a shruti box, and then just toning with the shruti box, what it does to you, the way it transforms your being and opens things up emotionally that have been locked inside and gives voice to those things, the feeling of freedom that comes through it, of being like, wow, I can actually free parts of myself that have been caged up for so long, and feels almost longer than like I've been in this physical body, like things that I've been carrying from like a previous incarnation. Almost, it's like you're finally giving those things a voice, and you don't have to be any good. And like, if you can't sing, like just rap. If you can't rap, you can do poetry. If you can't do poetry, you can just make sound. If you can't make sound with your voice, you can use an instrument. And I like, just the very last thing of this statement is just like looking at those kids in the class that had the disabilities. They all had so many different disabilities, and there was this one girl I remember, forgot her name, but she would always be like, a lot of the kids would get like this, like all hunched over. They'd just be like that, kind of like shaking a lot. They're just, their nervous systems were kind of locked up in a certain place, and they're very hypersensitive, I think, and other things. And a lot of them didn't come from necessarily the best, family life, I think, in a certain way. But I remember there was this one girl, she was pretty young, maybe like 11 or 12, and she'd be all like this, and then they would ask her to beatbox, and then she would just be like, just like all of a sudden expressing herself and just like open up, like physically open up after being in this very locked in position. And like that to me was just extraordinarily like illuminating, just to see like that's what music does. And then in addition to that, then they'd be like, okay, now opera sing. Because it turned out that she was like this not world class maybe, but like she was like super epic opera singer. And she would do like full throttle opera singing, like stand up and just be like, like own the whole place like it was a stage. And it was just such an illuminating thing, just to be like, that's what sound and vibration and music does, is it just opens doors that you otherwise like you just don't have access to. And it's the same thing of like the guy who had perfect pitch and other kids who could beatbox. Like, these kids have so many obstacles, but like all of them had like this epic hidden talent inside of them. And it's like, you think that you don't have any talent or any capacity, but I bet if you just like take a moment or some moments, jump in a cold river and, find something with your voice, you can discover something. So I just wanted to share that message. I think it's a good one.
It's so good. It's so good. It actually was reminding me, we have kids that live here in the community at the Eco Village, InterWorld Eco Village here. And one of them sometimes gets rowdy, the terrible twos, gets crazy out here. And just the other night, like, a few days ago, it's like he was kind of yelling, and I kind of did chikapa at him, started beatboxing, and he just like froze and got really happy. And I was like, we're adults are kind of like the kids. You just hit them with leaves and start beatboxing, and they get happy again. um, and we were just laughing about how similar we are. And then
Uh-huh.
and now I can see that he loves it, because we're at dinner yesterday and we were all like, "Oh man, let's stop the yelling," And he's like, "Well, what about the box beat? The box beat, yeah, it's the push, 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 push." He's like trying to beatbox already. It's so great. So,
Box me.
yeah. All right. Well, I had this last theme, which can be like our any closing words. And also just want to say that you and Ishel have been really good friends and really good mentors to me and to our community here, and that we always love having you out in Colorado for all kinds of gatherings and public events and things. We'll keep doing so. Hopefully people get a chance to, if they're listening from this end, meet you in person next time you come. And yeah, and I just wanted to go all the way back to 2012 and how the world didn't end. That's where I was going with that comment. And just our one world is ending and another world is beginning, and it's not happening overnight. Many of us have been seeing it happen maybe since before 2012, and now it's continuing into 2026, and it keeps shifting, and sometimes it seems slow and sometimes it really seems fast and intense, and hopefully now it seems like everyone's starting to catch on that it's happening, even if we've pretended that it was cuckoo and that it's not ending. Hopefully now even everybody on the news is agreeing, oh yeah, something's happening and something's changing and something's
Seems
ending.
like
And yeah, so any last insights you have for us about the end of the world and the new world that's coming, and how can we cope with the apocalypse, Jerry, in 3 short sentences before we have to go?
Sure. You actually wanted in 3 short sentences? I don't know if I could do
No,
that.
I'm
Okay,
I'm
good.
not in a rush. I have to wrap in a little bit, but you go ahead.
Yeah. Well, one door closes, another door opens. I mean, that right there, I think would simply encompass it. It's kind of like in a 2001: A Space Odyssey, where it's like there's all of a sudden this obelisk that appears that is ushering us into a new dimension, and then then the spaceship appears and AI comes, and then it turns on us, and then there's a moment where he jumps into outer space, into the void, and then the star baby comes, if you remember that movie. And every moment of transition that requires an extraordinary act of courage to, and that's the human story, right? It's like that. It is scary. Like it's going to shake you. And there are things that are terrifying and painful, but it's also incredibly beautiful, and that's important to remember. And it's only through a daring act of courage that we ever broke through to experience that beauty. And so whatever it is that holds for us on the other side, whether it's something with AI or society crumbling, and or something, a third vision of something that is beyond that, it doesn't really matter ultimately. What really matters is that we show up with a lot of courage and a lot of faith in the journey of the human experience, and trust, which is encompassed in faith, of course, that like this moment is perfect and that we don't need to necessarily fix anything about life. And that doesn't mean we discredit the suffering in the human world. It just means that we're able to peer through the veil of form to see the unity underlying all things and the perfection underneath all things, and trusting that by aligning ourselves with that vision and perception and understanding, that right action will arise. And right action is always like jump and a net will appear. That's the only way to be fully connected to that. And so I feel like the main thing to take away is like, yeah, things are crumbling. Yeah, atrocities happen. Yeah, there's ecocide, and there's all kinds of things that are just like, what is happening and where is the whole thing going? But the other really beautiful thing is that, like, in the ultimate depth of the human psyche, soul, spirit, body, being, consciousness, nothing is happening. Like Can you still hear me on this thing?
Yeah.
Okay, my mic is just being weird, but nothing is happening, and I love that Hindu concept. I think it is Leela, like that. Everything is a divine play, and to really step into the experience of that consciousness, which I don't know if one can consciously just choose to do that, but to really meditate on that idea that somehow this is a divine play that we are all participating in. You know, as Ram Dass says, we're like, uh, all of us are just God in drag. And I feel like that perception and that understanding does not bring one to a place where like nihilism and apathy take over. I think it leads you to a place where compassion and kindness and humility and peace and equanimity arise. That's been my experience of it. The more that I feel I've been able to open myself up to whatever life is, the more that I feel like I want to help people. I want to like listen to what other people have to say. I want to respect other people. I want to show other people that there's life beyond their pain and their own suffering, and that a better world is possible. So I think that fundamentally, it's like, don't worry about what's happening outside of you and really go very deep into what's happening inside of you. And you will find that there's a lot of peace and there's a lot of joy and lightheartedness, and that life is good. Like, life is very beautiful and it's very fierce, like very fierce. Like, wow. But it's super righteous. You know, there's something just really righteous about nature, and that feels like a little bit of like a spin-off on like what Wim Hof says. I think something along the lines of like, nature is righteous. It's like it's fierce, but it's righteous, something like that. And I think that that's a really important message that, like, yeah, there is suffering in the world, but equally there is joy, and don't lose sight of that. Have faith in the way things are. Be happy, be peaceful. All things are changing. Don't get attached.
Yeah. Thank you. And in case, it seems like an invitation to look away, that invitation to look in, I want to say, is then also that possibility for co-creating what we want the play to look like. And I just want to really emphasize that then next possibility of like, well, what if the birth of a new world is something glorious and as epic as we could possibly imagine? And what kind of role can we play in that? Because what would it look like if all of this illusion crumbling and whatever other apocalyptic sounding visions I manifested with my question there from you, what if all of that Leela, of that illusion, is like you backstep so that you can forward step because that's how the play and the dance works? And then what does it look like if we go deep inside and we find a lot of peace and a lot of joy, and rather than staying there because we find that wellspring, that's what we then bring out, and then that's the play, and that's the next dream that we decide to create together, is one that's just so beautiful and so harmonious. And so what would it look like to come together and work on that? And I think that that's a good place to leave it. Did you want to add a
Oh, just as you were saying that, I was just thinking, like, when you look inside yourself, when I look inside myself, I sit down and practice, like, I find a lot of happiness. And then where that leads me is I want to then share that with people. It's like by going in, I then find myself being like, oh, I actually want to help this person out. I want to like spend time with somebody. I want to do something good for somebody. I just feel like that's just a funny thing, right? It's like you look inside and then you're like, oh, happiness is here, peace is here. I want to share that with somebody. So yeah, I just affirmation of what you said, and thank you for everything that you guys are doing. You guys totally inspire me. I love coming to visit y'all and seeing everything that you guys are doing. It's super epic and definitely inspires all of us that come in contact with you guys. And I'm very much looking forward to coming back out there. And yeah, just thank you for all the stuff that you guys do and your time and patience and presence. And yeah, man, it's great to see you. Thank you.
love you, bro? Thank you. Peace.
Much love. Peace.